Okay, good morning again, participants. Thank you for joining us. DSG, we have approximately 132 persons online at this time. I'm going to start the meeting. Good morning. I am the chairperson for today's proceedings. My name is Jennifer Britton, and I'm going to just start with a few welcoming remarks, and then we will have DSG do her opening remarks. Deputy Secretary General, Ambassador Manorma Soeknandan, members of the Executive Management Committee of the Secretariat and partner organizations, heads of regional and international institutions, featured speaker Dr. Barbara Reynolds, other speakers in the program today, CARICOM youth ambassadors, the CARICOM Secretariat Girls and ICT team, and other staff of the Secretariat, students and teachers from CARICOM member states, youth leaders, other youth ambassadors and advocates, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning. It is with Caribbean pride, as our CARICOM song says, which was playing while you logged in, and honor that I issue a warm welcome to you to this first digital dialogue of 2020, organized by the Caribbean Community Girls in ICT Partnership, as we observe International Girls in ICT Day with the rest of the world. The partnership was formed in 2019, and we're pleased to be able to provide tangible expression through this series of digital dialogue, which will be hosted in 2020 and 2021. International Girls in ICT, as we know, or as we should know, is celebrated on the fourth Thursday in April of every year. This event here today is part of a global movement instituted by the ITU to inspire girls and young women to learn more about the amazing opportunities and careers offered by the ICT sector. Technology developments are creating new opportunities, and most young people will be in jobs in the future which do not exist today. Consequently, the partners were very deliberate in choosing the word dialogue, since one of our aims is to have persons both in and out of the CARICOM region take part in conversation and discussion to provide working solutions for informing about, exposing, attracting, and retaining girls in the ICT sector. Given the prevailing issues in the world today, there is more pressing need to ensure that girls and women have access to technology and the internet. As we all deal with the effects of the COVID-19 virus, much of the health advice is being published electronically and shared over the internet. It makes an even more compelling cause for why girls must be given the education that equips them to apply knowledge and be comfortable with gadgets and apps, and provides the basis for our conversations today, which will be centered around empowering girls and using them as key input into actualizing CARICOM's potential, getting some input from all of you on key dialogue points related to ICT, youth, COVID, and girls and women's empowerment, and we will also get some reactions from two of our CARICOM youth ambassadors to the discussions today and possible next steps for moving forward. I cannot, I think, close the welcome without acknowledging that all of us are being affected at this time by the COVID virus, which has just entered our knowledge base a few short months ago. For young people and girls around the world who we celebrate today, this is just the latest challenge, since you've already faced issues such as global warming, political instability, and the Great Recession. In all instances, women feel the stresses more. So while we celebrate and commemorate this day, there is soberness around us. But COVID-19 has also helped to put the spotlight on things that we take for granted: connectivity, connection with each other, caregiving, and conversations. These are all intrinsic attributes and characteristics of women and girls. And as we know, women and girls are half of the world's population and therefore half of the world's human potential. So there's opportunity for gratitude today and great hope for a renewed future where women and girls will play a central role, and that future will probably be predominantly digital and predominantly female for the Caribbean community, as it will be for the rest of the world. I will pause my welcome there. We're a few minutes late and I don't want to keep the DSG much longer waiting for her opening remarks. But I'd like to thank you for listening to me, and please let the world know that you're here enjoying this dialogue by getting creative on TikTok, Instagram, Snapchat, whatever you're comfortable with as we go through the dialogue today. I will move into our first item of the program today, which is our our opening remarks, by Ambassador Soeknandan, Manorma Soeknandan, who is the Deputy Secretary General of CARICOM. Just a little bit about Ambassador Soeknandan so that you will all know a little more about our Deputy Secretary General. She is from Suriname, which is a member state of CARICOM, and is the current Deputy Secretary General of the Caribbean Community. Her qualifications include a PhD in International Studies and Diplomacy, a degree in law, among other specifications. She has worked as a lawyer at the Ministry of Justice and Police in Suriname before joining the Diplomatic Corps. Before she joined us in 2014, the Deputy Secretary General was the first female ambassador of Suriname to Guyana, CARICOM, Cuba, and Jamaica, and she also holds the honor of being the first female ambassador in Guyana, I guess, period. While she was ambassador in Guyana, she helped to initiate a secondary school examination students project, which is mainly a yearly visit to Guyana from students from Suriname. Ambassador Soeknandan, as I said before, joined the Secretariat in February 2014. The internal Girls in ICT team asked her in April to support and open the celebration that year, which was the first in the Secretariat, and without hesitation, she accepted. This was a clear indication for all of us that she was not afraid to take chances, ask probing questions, and she was well able to chart her own course. From 2014 to present day, Ambassador Soeknandan has been unwavering in her support for this Girls in ICT initiative. Additionally, she has been instrumental in opening necessary conversations and establishing gender equality and equity in the CARICOM Secretariat. As the Deputy Secretary General, Ambassador Soeknandan provides daily support to the Secretary General in matters related to the community and has responsibility for the majority of operations in the Secretariat, as well as finance, strategic management, and statistics. I think you would all agree with me that we are blessed this morning, and it is our privilege and honor to receive opening remarks from perhaps the most senior female in the Caribbean community from an organizational perspective. So please join with me in welcoming Ambassador Manorma Soeknandan to deliver her opening remarks. You may clap, but please keep your mics closed. Thank you. Yes,
thank you very much, Ms. Britton. You said much more than I was expecting to hear. But anyway, thank you very much. Senior officials and representatives of the Ministries of ICT, Culture, Education, Youth, Gender in our Caribbean community, members of CARICOM Girls in ICT Partnership, heads of regional institutions, staff of the CARICOM Secretariat, CARICOM Youth Ambassadors, CARICOM Girls, Boys, Parents, and Teachers, presenters and collaborators in today's program. I was informed that Dr. Barbara Reynolds will be presenting. Two CARICOM Youth Ambassadors, Mr. Lyle Jackson from Barbados and Ms. Trishata Jeffrey from Antigua and Barbuda, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen. And I saw Suriname is joining too. I do not know about Haiti, so it's my duty to say good morning, bonjour, goedemorgen to everyone. On behalf of the Secretary General, I welcome you to this 2020 observance of Girls in ICT Day, being hosted by CARICOM Girls in ICT Partnership for the CARICOM region, and I also welcome you to this, the first digital dialogue to be presented by the partnership. In observing this day with you, we continue to align the Caribbean community with the United Nations and the International Telecommunications Union's call for action on the use of information communications technology to empower women and girls to meet their goals and aspirations. The annual theme for this observance is Expand Horizons, Change Attitudes. Well chosen, given the challenges we're in right now. This year, for its first event, the CARICOM Girls in ICT Partnership has chosen to celebrate around the theme Regional Resilience, ICT, STEM, and Youth. Okay. I am pleased that the partnership has determined to deal with two or more important topics to continue the regional conversation on empowering girls and women and actualizing the potential for the region, and looking at some of the issues related to youth as we all deal with the COVID-19 crisis. Resilience is one of our watchwords in the Caribbean community. and it was enshrined in our strategic plan of 2015-2019. And it will be again an integral part of the next strategic plan, which is now being developed. And I'm sure when we go into member states and in our national consultations, you will also participate. Our region is constantly under threat, and we must plan and strategize ahead to recover from each disruption. We have a habit of doing things afterwards. We have to plan ahead. Brazil, we meet today at a time when the entire world has been disrupted and is joining forces in hopes of mitigating the effects of the COVID-19 virus and saving lives. Sadly, as evidenced by the United Nations, women and girls are more vulnerable in times of disruption, be it through a crisis as COVID-19 or changes to jobs through automation. There is much news around regarding the COVID-19 virus, and I urge you to stay updated as to the issues surrounding our daily lives. While we do not yet know for sure when we will be allowed to resume what we view as normal lives, one thing is sure. We as a people, we have to change, we have to conduct our businesses, our activities, our lives differently. It also means that for many of us in the developing world, we have to look for new and emerging opportunities to ensure a good quality of life for the people of our Caribbean community. And today we are forced to give value to physical freedom, respect nature, and all aspects of it. In developed countries, several studies and reports support the fact that when more women and girls join the workforce in sectors supported and dependent on science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, there is accelerated social and economic development. We, women and girls, can be proud of the special perspective we bring to the STEM field and other fields. In a white paper published in March 2020 by Future Place Leadership, a management consultancy based in Stockholm, Sweden, and it was entitled Women in Tech, Global Best Practices for Enhancing Opportunities for Women in the Tech Sector, we can read the following. Against the backdrop of the fourth industrial revolution, the tech sector is gaining more and more importance in the global economy with increased potential for job creation. And see what is happening now. The paper highlights, however, that women are structurally underrepresented in the sector and points toward a growing gap between the number of jobs created and a shrinking share of women in tech. In another report called Women in the Digital Age, commissioned by the European Union in 2018, the EU study shows that the share of men working in the sector is 313% greater than the share of women, as well as that there are still 4 times more men in ICT-related studies than women, and that is in Europe alone. Another report from ADEFA, that's a consulting firm in the US, states that women are obtaining STEM degrees, but struggle finding the motivation to join and stay in the tech industry. The UN Secretary General, in his speech on International Day of Women in Science in February of this year, highlighted the fact that girls and boys perform equally well in science and mathematics, but only a fraction of female students in higher education choose to study sciences, and called for more supportive career development for women scientists and researchers. While some of the news and statistics may be discouraging, we continue to read success and heartening stories. I will name a few from this COVID-19 period, such as Afghanistan robotics girls team making ventilators from old car parts to help their country fight the coronavirus. Hashim, a young people's group in Africa, organizing a tweet chat about how to keep safe against COVID-19. Young women in New Orleans, that's the USA, Louisiana, developed and implemented a drive-through testing center, and Jamaican youth inventing a simple to install device that automatically disinfects doorknobs and handles after each use, and other Jamaican youths building emergency ventilators and 3D face shields. We have to lessen the gender gap, provide access to resources, empower, learn, early expose girls to technology, make role models visible. Many households still lack basic IT equipment. I have recently experienced that many of our children do not have a computer in their homes, so they cannot follow classes. Many have expensive latest model cell phones, but they cannot pay for the internet, or they cannot pay on a regular basis for internet. So we do need increased positive messages about science, technology, engineering, and mathematics and ICT, and the role of relevance of ICT in schools at all levels, including primary and secondary school. But we must also help more of our CARICOM girls and women to join the ICT revolution. And we must assist our youth in accessing ICT, which is very important, be it through equipment or be it making the internet more affordable, or also helping our youth to make the right choices. These are all issues which will be undertaken by the CARICOM Girls and ICT Partnership as it continues its work to develop policy which supports the region's empowerment and which responds to the Sustainable Goals Agenda Blueprint for Development by 2030. The partnership is expected to work as a network of networks with similar structures replicated at the member state levels for developing the next generation of leaders in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. While this day is girl-centered, I cannot close without imploring and challenging men and boys to also get involved. We are missing you at the university level. What we are experiencing also a decrease of the amount of men in the workforce and in tertiary education and at the universities. Okay, so you have to get involved also in the drive to get more women into the tech sector and to encourage boys and men to join that sector as well. Additionally, getting more girls and women cannot happen without the involvement of the men who already have a seat at the table. Rest assured that the partnership will include initiatives for boys as well in its work program. Today, we celebrate girls and women who have paved the way and continue to work hard to make the field better for others. And we celebrate the potential of girls around the world. In fact, we meet today with the ease of using the internet and other ICT tools because of the contribution, participation, and involvement of women and girls many years ago, the so-called hidden figures. As I have done in several of my remarks and speeches to commemorate Girls in ICT Day, I challenge you to become active advocates of bridging the gender gap across the region and the world, and for girls to go after and receive high-level, high-paying jobs, and to make sure that future girls in the sector do not remain hidden. I have said enough, and I think you need to hear from other speakers also. My hope is that you will learn something new today and that you will make a commitment to support our CARICOM Girls in ICT Partnership in tangible ways. I am sure that the dialogue will be an enjoyable one, and I also encourage you to ask as many questions as necessary. Thank you for joining the CARICOM Secretariat and other key partners today. Continue learning, help each other, stay safe, and stay healthy. Thank you very much. And thank you, Ms. Britton, for the organization.
Okay. I'm going to ask one of our, thank you, DSG. I'm going to ask one of our partners, Mr. Thomas from the ITU, hopefully he's on and ready to introduce our featured speaker to the meeting this morning.
Good morning to you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, a blessed day to everyone. My name is Cleveland Thomas, and I am the United Nations ITU's Caribbean Regional Head. First, let me join with the others in wishing everyone a happy International Girls in ICT Day 2020 today. You would have heard that the theme this year is Expand Horizon, Change Attitudes. All over the world today, it's another opportunity to inspire girls and young women in the tech sector and to promote the exciting career opportunities waiting for them. Today, I am not only pleased, but I'm quite excited to introduce our featured speaker, a highly qualified, experienced, and one of the most inspiring young women in our region. Inspiring as an educator, a developer, a motivator, a mentor, and I dare to say, even at a spiritual level. I am talking of no other than Dr. Barbara Reynolds, who will be speaking on the topic, Girls and ICT, Actualizing CARICOM's Potential. Let me just give you a brief background in the interest of time concerning Dr. Reynolds. She began her professional career as a teacher at the Central High School in Georgetown, Guyana, before moving to secondary school teaching in Trinidad, and then taking up a position as a teacher and assistant principal at the Westmoreland Secondary School in Grenada. She spent some 23 plus years with UNICEF in a range of capacities, including representational and program assignments in education, child protection, and innovation in many countries throughout the world: Angola, Botswana, China, Zambia, and even New York. She later served as head of education for Save the Children UK before taking up the position as Deputy Vice Chancellor, Planning and International Engagement, and Deputy Vice Chancellor, Academics at the University of Guyana. Dr. Reynolds has taken a key interest in the development response to internally displaced persons, the role of the private sector in education, and the integration of computer technologies in education. She is an active human rights professional and gender mainstream facilitator. She is also the founding member of NCD Child, an international alliance of individuals and organizations committed to the prevention, treatment, and care of children and adolescents affected by NCDs. She holds a BA in Education, an MA in Curriculum and Teaching from Howard University, the postgraduate diploma in distance education from the University of London, a doctorate of education in international education development, curriculum, and instruction from Columbia University, and has a master's in international human rights law from the University of Oxford. I understand that she also speaks a second language, that is Portuguese. So I perhaps can say bem feito, meaning simply well done. Outside of her work, she is active in her home church, particularly in the areas of music, religious liberty, and youth development. Ladies and gents, her presentation today does not follow the traditional face-to-face meetings because of the COVID-19 situation, but it still will be great. Dr. Reynolds has to say today, what she has to say today is important and relevant, and I would strongly suggest that you get out your computer or your pads and just simply get ready for a treat. I hand you over now to share with us on Girls and ICT, Actualizing CARICOM's Potential. Dr. Reynolds, over to you.
Muito bom dia, senhor, e muito obrigada pela introdução. Era muito mais do que preciso, mas agradeço. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I have, over the last few weeks, instead of greeting people with good morning, I'm saying be safe and well. I think the virus, COVID-19, has pitched our world into a new way of being and knowing and living. And I'm not going to dwell on that too much today, but it is certainly important for us to acknowledge that. I'd like to extend an appreciation to the Deputy Secretary General of CARICOM, to Ms. Britton, and to the CARICOM colleagues, to the partnership, to those of you around the region, and if you're not in the region, welcome so very much this beautiful Thursday morning. Before I go any further, I want to call attention to a little piece of data that has gotten lost over the last 3 years. On the 14th of April 2014 in Nigeria, hundreds of girls were kidnapped. Some of them remain untraced up to now. And I can't help but wonder, with the technology that we have, that we can put a man on the moon, that we are unable to locate hundreds of young women who by now are either dead, abused. Some of them have become mothers in captivity. Some of them have suffered from a syndrome that turns one's captivity into something quite negative in terms of adulation of one's captors. It seems to me that that's a point that we should never forget, because the sad thing about it is that there are hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of girls in captivity around the world. The second point I want to make is that the fact that we have hundreds of thousands of girls in captivity of all kinds does not negate our attention to, interest in, and support for boys. One of the points we must always underscore is that when we speak of girls and women, we're also speaking about boys and men. And so it's critical for us to always bear that in mind. I would like to be able to share a screen with you right now. I hope you can see it. I see that the host has disabled participant screen sharing. So your ability to see what's on my screen is lost. Unless your host is able to enable my screening, I will go ahead with what I wanted to share with you. I want to take us back to 1973. That's the Treaty of Chaguaramas. Treaty of Chaguaramas emphasized three big ideas. First, economic integration, in terms of strengthening coordination and regulation, in terms of sustained expansion and continuing integration of economic activities, and the achievement of a greater measure of economic independence and effectiveness. The second one is coordination of foreign policies. And the third is functional cooperation. And under functional cooperation, the efficient operation of certain common services and activities across our CARICOM region. Greater understanding among its peoples. And here is an interesting factoid: social, cultural, and technological development. So the pursuit of ICT in CARICOM goes right back to its DNA of 1973. This was foreseen by the framers of the treaty, and it has always been a part of CARICOM's focus and CARICOM's intention for us as a region to become better integrated and better functioning. I lifted off CARICOM's website that its mandate is to promote and support a unified Caribbean community that is inclusive, resilient, competitive, sharing in economic, social, and cultural prosperity. That's critical because of our geography, because of our diversity. When we speak of ICT, the only way, or one of the few ways that CARICOM can achieve this, is through ICT. And let me put it another way: CARICOM will not be able to achieve this unified Caribbean community that is inclusive, resilient, competitive, sharing in economic, social, and cultural prosperity without the two factors we are speaking about today. And the first, of course, is girls and women juxtaposed with boys and men, and of course, with ICT. I'm going to jump from 1973 and go to 1981. 1981 is an interesting year globally. In 1981, on August 12, IBM put on the market IBM Model 5150, the first IBM PC. It was the first marketable PC. Bear in mind that researchers had been doing a lot of work on computers and the personal computer for decades. But on this date, in 1981, the IBM PC Model 5150 was put on the market. By the end of 1981, 65,000 had been purchased, most of them in the developed world, and 100,000 more were ordered. In that same year, ladies and gentlemen, on May 18, the first public article on the AIDS epidemic was published in New York Native. In 1981, 337 people were known to have contracted the disease. Fast forward to today, and the situation is remarkably different. So let me tell you what the situation is in 2020. There are over 2 billion personal computers in use. Over 50% of the world's population has access to a computer, but here's the interesting factoid. About 35% of persons in developing countries have access to a computer, compared with 80% in developed countries. And we switch to that other indicator that we're using today. Today, there are 39.7 million people living with HIV and AIDS. 25.9 million of them in Africa, 5.9 million in Asia Pacific, and only 2.2 million of those 39.7 million in Western Europe and North America. Since 1981, ladies and gentlemen, 75 million people have been infected with with HIV, and 32 million have died. And then we come to this interesting concept of COVID-19. So far, so good. So that's 2020. So here's the CARICOM story. We're juxtaposing two indicators. One, the penetration of personal computers, and second, the penetration of disease. I want to emphasize the fact that disease has a greater impact on morbidity and mortality in developing countries and in developed countries, more than climate change currently, more than natural disasters currently, and more than social conflict all combined. The greater burden is on disease. Disease that drives mortality and morbidity, and with the morbidity comes limited capacity for productivity, for production, for learning, for teaching, learning, and for social cohesion. If we look at the incidence of COVID-19 right now in the US, 26,000 persons dead, compared with 9/11, 3,000. That's a horrendous, absolutely horrendous differential. And the interesting thing about this is that we don't know where this disease burden is taking us, either globally or regionally. The CARICOM story, ladies and gentlemen, is that we stand between and betwixt these two indicators, the ICT revolution, if we can call it that, and the disease burden. Within our region, there's diversity on both indicators, vast diversity, but collectively, some might argue we're not doing too badly. And that's why I wanted to title what I wanted to say today in terms of potential. CARICOM's story is that we have the fundamentals that can push us in either direction. Either our disease burden can increase exponentially and our access to ICT decrease, or our access to ICT can increase exponentially and our disease burden can decrease. We have the potential to move into positive territory on both directions, and that's absolutely critical for us. So we're 20 countries, we're 18 million citizens. Among those 18 million citizens, 60% are under the age of 30. That's a plus. We have diverse geography and economics. So that if you were to look at penetration of ICT in Guyana, you'd see it's just about 50%. Why? Because we have a vast hinterland. Belize, similarly. But if you look at the ICT penetration of many of our islander nation states, it's 100%. That's a critical fact for us to remember. We're different peoples, indigenous peoples, Africans, Indians, Europeans, Chinese, Portuguese, and Javanese. And I must say, I'm never quite sure why we always make a differentiation between Portuguese and Europeans. But anyway, that's a sociological issue. We have diverse languages, English, French, Dutch, Creole, and Creolese. We have mainland states and islander states. We have only $82.9 million US gross development product across the region. Interestingly enough, we have thousands of tourists. That's a plus. In terms of disease burden, it's a risk. And ICT penetration. As I said before, ICT penetration varies across the region, nearly 100 for several islands and as low as 50% in Guyana. So we come back to who we are as a region, and I wanted to go to 4 CARICOM institutions that I think are instructive. So, cricket. What have we learned from cricket as a region? How is it that we can have a West Indies team for which we go crazy when they're playing World Cup? I mean, even if we don't understand how to bowl or how to bat, we know the score. We know the difference between 4 and 6. We know when somebody is out or when somebody is out. We may not know what a googly is, but we know whether we're winning or losing. What it is about us as a region that can galvanize us behind cricket, and how do we harness that community in our diversity to move forward? So that's the first one. It's one of my favorites, cricket. Every West Indian child understands cricket. Poor or rich, you give them a piece of wood, and you give them an awara seed and some old tires. And those of us who are well endowed, you don't know what an awara seed is when it's covered by rubber bands or old tires. That's your ball. It's a hard ball. It's very effective. Just don't get it near to your eye or your school's window. So the second one to which I turn is something called CARIFESTA. And CARIFESTA has waxed and waned, but I'm delighted that it's back on track. What can we learn about CARIFESTA? CARIFESTA is where we celebrate our diversity as a region, our racial diversity, our religious diversity, our artistic diversity, our cultural diversity, and yet there's something that's quintessential Caribbean in CARIFESTA. The reason I wanted to start with cricket and CARIFESTA is because we're talking about ICT today, and I wanted to emphasize that ICT would be meaningless without the arts and sports. It's the arts and sports that help us to retain our humanity. They're both socializing factors. And it would be a scary world if we were pure ICT without the arts and without sports. So then I go to the third Caribbean phenomenon. It's something that is called CXC. Now, CXC has a lot of aficionados and it has a lot of persons who are critical of it. But the fact of the matter is that it binds us together on a dimension that is particularly important today, and that is our secondary education. The validation of what our children and grandchildren, our cousins and our aunts know and learn. The sad thing about CXC is that perhaps too many Caribbean students are left behind and left out of the CXC equation. I want to come back to that. The fourth one I wanted to mention, of course, is the CARICOM Secretariat and its role. and the push for CSME. Now I've chosen these four and a half, CSME is still a half for me. I've chosen these 4 CARICOM institutions, these 4 quintessential Caribbean institutions, to help us to understand that where we're heading, we've already been. We've come a long way. So our diversity is critical to who we are. And it's something that binds us together in a very interesting way, because who we have become so far and where we're heading is all caught up in what we have already learned how to do through cricket and through CARIFESTA and through CXC, and in pursuit of CSME as a region, a tiny region, 16 million persons, 18 million persons, whatever it is the number says. On the CARICOM website, I noticed we use 16 million. There are other people who say 18 million. That's quite okay. The fact of the matter is, in a world of 7 billion people, 18 million people are not a lot. And that's a demographic that I wanted to emphasize as we look at who we are and how we move forward. So from the 4 C's that I've mentioned, there are 4 fundamentals that stand out for me. And first is the mindset. Okay, so our mindset, we like to think, is Caribbean. That's great. But what does it mean to have a Caribbean mindset? Does it perhaps mean mañana? Does it perhaps mean aujourd'hui? Does it perhaps mean just soca? Or does it mean the ultimate in professionalization? So I put to you today, how do we figure out what our mindset is as a region in terms of the political a la policy, in terms of the cultural and social? We know there's a mindset. One of the things that I eschew is folks telling me in Guyana, don't worry, we's Guyanese, this is how we do things. Because invariably, when someone says that to me, it's a pseudo apology for not coming up to scratch. And therefore we hide behind this supposed Caribbean or Guyanese mindset that we as Guyanese, this is how we do things, and it didn't really matter. So beyond the mindset, I want to flag our methods. And here's where I think that we have the opportunity to craft fit-for-purpose programs and procedures to suit such a diverse region. The approach that we might use in Belize or Guyana is not the same that we need to use in St. Lucia or St. Vincent. The approach that we might use for girls, ladies and gentlemen, is not necessarily the approach we need to use for boys. And when we talk about the low participation or limited participation of girls and women in ICT, we need to hark back to how they were approached. How did they learn science and technology? How do girls differ in boys in terms of the approach to learning? And how do teachers differ in their approach to teaching? And when we translate that to online learning, how do we translate the different ways, modalities to meet the gendered needs of boys and girls? And then, of course, we have to prioritize the means, the hard old cash, the capital development. ICT is not cheap. It will never be cheap. It will always be expensive, but it's the kind of expensive without which we cannot live. And then, of course, the methods that we approach. I want to put on the table 4 methods: education, professionalization, sharing, and shaping. And I want to just touch a little bit on sharing and shaping. So across the region, most of us are involved in ICT through sharing. Actually, these days, I'm concerned by the number of WhatsApp messages that I receive, which are all the same. So we're doing a lot of sharing. We're not shaping. In fact, we pass on things that haven't been fact-checked. We're not shaping. So we pass on things that somebody has dreamed up elsewhere, but we're not shaping. So it's good to share, but we have to use the ICT to shape our culture, to shape or teaching and learning, to shape our society, to shape who we are as citizens, and not just merely copy and paste and forward. And I'm using that metaphorically and not only just in WhatsApp. Because the fact of the matter is, the approaches in Singapore will not fit well with our societies. So sharing and shaping, there has to be a good balance between those two. I want to also make a distinction between education and professionalization. There is a need for professionalizing everything that we do. Absolutely everything. The basket weaver, from whom we buy baskets at Easter or Christmas to give us gifts, must professionalize his or her craft. Because if he or she does not do that, we will not buy their baskets. The plumber whom we call must give us a business card. Otherwise, we wouldn't know where to find him. And so the professionalization of every aspect of our productive sector, production sector, whether we consider it important or not, has to be important. How we keep abreast of what's happening in the 21st century across the world in each profession and functional area is critical. And then I've come to my favorite place where I started, and that's education. Before I touch on education, let me just say something about gender and girls. First of all, it's incredibly important for us to remember that the perception and role of gender is changing. And we've moved from a binary gender conception to non-binary. We have multiple genders. They're persons who move in and out of their gender. They're persons who feel that they're multiple genders. And so while the default is to talk about girls and women, boys and men, let us make an explicit attempt to be inclusive and to integrate people who subscribe to a non-binary view of gender. I want to emphasize again something I just touched on, that education, production, social cohesion, and leadership are gendered, and that the way girls and women, boys and men, and people who have multiple genders engage in education, production, social cohesion, and leadership is going to be diverse. And therefore, our approaches to education, our approaches to production, our approaches to social cohesion, our approaches to leadership must also take into account this non-binary but multiple ways of being and knowing and learning. And how we teach and learn is critical. And then my penultimate focus here, STEM, STEAM, STREAM. ICT Day. Let me say that everyone who's on this call today is a convert. I don't think that there's anybody who doesn't appreciate ICT who's on the call today. So it's not about speaking to the converted. It's about how we, as advocates, as policymakers, as supporters, can ensure that those who, in the first instance, are not convinced about the centrality of ICT become convinced of the centrality of ICT. And then secondly, how do we support the full integration of ICT at multiple levels? And the first of us, that is, of course, the basics: reading, writing, arithmetic, and reasoning. Reading, writing, arithmetic, and reasoning, so that when we talk about stream, the R for me is reading, writing, arithmetic, and reasoning. And then the A, ladies and gentlemen, I've touched a little bit on the arts. But in the region where we are, there are two other A's I want to emphasize. One of them is agriculture. In any crisis, if we can feed ourselves, we're halfway home. I was delighted to see FAO put something in our national newspapers last week on food security, on agriculture, on the imperative of maintaining our agriculture production and productivity. I don't think we need guns, but we sure do need food. So agriculture has to be fully integrated into stream, and we have to take a scientific approach to agriculture. We have to use ICT to fuel agriculture. And the last A for me, of course, is architecture. The amount of money that we spend on AC is phenomenal. And in a region that is tropical, in a region that is equatorial, we have to figure out how we build houses and other buildings, offices, where half of our budget does not go to air conditioning. That's critical. And we know how to do it, and we could also do it. But then there are other things in architecture that are critical. And I come back to the issue of climate change and the cyclical physical disasters that help us to understand that architecture in stream is critical. Ladies and gentlemen, the point about this, however, is that we cannot divorce ICT from the arts and ICT from reading, arithmetic, reasoning, and writing, divorce ICT from agriculture and architecture. They're all wrapped up in one. And educators have to figure out how to use different methods of teaching and learning to ensure that they're integrated. And I want to emphasize the point that our teacher training colleges and our tertiary education institutions are possibly going to be the first to make this shift, so that when they teach teachers and teach professionals to think in a different way, then our kids, our students will be able to learn in a different way, and that cycle will be changed. Two other critical things. We must redefine basic education to include post-secondary education. It is no longer, I don't care which development partner says, basic education is it. I've been in that field for 25 years. It is no longer sufficient for us in developing countries to promote primary and secondary education. Ladies and gentlemen, if we do not invest and invest heavily in post-secondary education, whether it's higher education, BA, MA, QRC, ZMQ, it really doesn't matter. For heaven's sake, let us push 50% of our population at the minimum into post-secondary education, training, orientation, reorientation. In every village, we should have somebody who has achieved a doctorate. In every village, we should have 10% of our persons with a full post-secondary education. In every village, we should have post-secondary technician training. And I use the word village in two ways, geographically and culturally, because each of us has a village that we can influence. And so let's move basic education to include post-secondary education. And the last point on STEM, STEAM, and STREAM is the need, ladies and gentlemen, for data collection and research. If we don't know what we know, and if we don't know what we don't know, we're not going to go anywhere. We need to know what we know. We need to know who knows it and how well they know it and why they know it and how do they know it. And we need to know what we don't know. When I was looking this morning, yesterday, for the last week on data for a range of issues, I realized that we're slightly below par in terms of data collection and dissemination. But by golly, the research is off. It is insufficient. So I'm going to close with a somewhat scary proposition for us. So, girls and women, boys and men. Ladies and gentlemen, what we have learned from the Japanese is that boys and men cope differently with girls and women from situations like where we are now. There's a whole body of literature on that. We're seeing in COVID-19, men succumbing more to the virus than women. It is not merely physiological. They're confined in small spaces. Work has diminished. The emotional intelligence perhaps is not as well defined as it needs to be to cope. Women have been coping for a long time, hundreds of years. And so I want to suggest that, yes, we focus on girls and women, but we realize that they're 50% of the proposition. They are husbands and boyfriends and partners, or fathers and grandfathers, or sons and nephews. They are pastors. They are teachers. They are bosses. They are reportees. They are our neighbors. We need to ensure that they're there with us on this. So I go to the last point here. Where shall we be in 2021? Well, DSG spoke this morning very, very clearly about where CARICOM as a secretariat wants to take us. Let me put on the table five indicators, I think, where come 2021 we ought to be. We want to move to an IT-supported but not an IT-driven society. Ladies and gentlemen, we don't want to lose our Caribbean spirit. We don't want to lose our sense of community. We don't want to lose who we are as social beings. So the IT should support and not drive our progress. An IT-supported, not driven society. We should move to education systems and production systems that are powered by ITC. And there's an interesting experiment in Israel about how ITC is being used to care for the development of plants at the level of plants and not at the level of orchards or fields. That they understand how each plant is growing. If agriculture is to flourish, I don't think we need to look at each plant necessarily, but we need to look at how ICT fuels that powerhouse called agriculture in our region. We want to get to a 2021 and beyond where we have IT facilitated collaboration and competition, both internally and externally. I attended a wonderful high school where the hallmarks were collaboration and competition. Ladies and gentlemen, let's remember that collaboration without competition breeds stagnancy and complacency. Competition without collaboration breeds aggression, if not greed. So we want that competitive spirit and that collaborative spirit to infuse everything that we do as individuals and as a region. We want positive exploitation of our diversity. And in this regard, our language education is critical. Not just the European languages that we inherited from colonialism, but our indigenous languages and the languages that we speak at home. But we must be versatile in all of them. We cannot choose to eschew one above the other. That would be plain stupid. And the last time I checked, there's no Caribbean person who's stupid. We're smart people. So our language diversity, our cultural diversity, our geographic diversity. 4 days ago, I took a photo of some Guyanese mangoes. And I sent it to my daughter in the US and I say, I'm gonna do a swap with you. You have my mangoes and give me some of your potato chips. But the point I was making to her is here at home, there is something culturally that we have that we can prize. And then the last point I want to say is that as a Caribbean region, we have a lot of potential. I think we've made a lot of progress. Ms. Britton made allusion to the CARICOM song, Caribbean Pride. Ladies and gentlemen, let's move from potential through progress to true pride. Pride that is grounded in achievement, pride that is grounded in cohesion and coherence, pride that's grounded in a sense of community. I want to thank you, and I want to say thank you to Ms. Britton for including me in this wonderful day. Boys and girls, men and women, happy Girls ICT Day across the region. Please encourage your young people to get involved in ICT, not just to share it, but to shape it. And I'm happy to respond to any questions at the appropriate time. And I turn you back to our host. Thank you so very much.